Many of the most popular characters within Red Dead Redemption 2 story are part of the Van Der Linde gang. The leader of this gang is the well-known Dutch Van Der Linde. Love him or hate him, he plays a vital role throughout the entire Red Dead Redemption storyline. By being the leader of the gang, he puts himself and others through many ups and downs. And in this video, we'll be walking through the rise and fall of Dutch Van Der Linde. Dutch has already lived a fairly packed life before the intro of Red Dead Redemption 2. Unfortunately, Rockstar Games only gives us a few key details about his life before. Just like the majority of Red Dead Redemption 2 characters, the backstory for Dutch mostly remains a mystery. There were a few small moments where Dutch made minor references to his past life, whether that be about his family or childhood. There is one thing that is clear, and one thing he admits to: it was painful. Dutch had a very strained relationship with his own family. Many believe this is the reason he chose to form and lead such a close and diverse gang. Dutch later considered his gang to be his family, viewing John Marston and Arthur Morgan as son-like figures. There was even a point in the past where the Van Der Linde gang actually separated, and it wasn't long after this where Dutch tried to form another group just before John eventually got back to him. And this does back up the theory of Dutch craving a close and friendly group to consider as his family, because it is something he simply didn't get as a child. After all of this, you might be thinking, well, what happened to Dutch's parents? Why did he have such a rough childhood? And just like previous theories, a lot of all of this remains unknown. Across both Red Dead Redemption games, we do however get a few bits of info on Dutch's backstory. We know that Dutch was born in 1855, making him 44 at the beginning of Red Dead Redemption 2 and 56 at a point in Red Dead Redemption. His mother is briefly mentioned, and we do know her name is Greta, whilst his father remains a mystery. There is one specific encounter where the gang are socializing at the campfire, and Dutch admits that his parents were poor and struggled to make enough money to live before they ever made a trip over to America. He mentions that his parents were peasants starving in a field. He never mentioned exactly when his parents died, but it's revealed his father perished in the Civil War. We also know that Dutch's mother died sometime after he left home, although this was of unknown causes. At the age of 15, Dutch ran away from home due to a strained relationship he had with his parents, and this left him homeless and with no education. This is the point in Dutch's life where he began engaging in criminal activities to make a living. It was a few years after this point in which Dutch met Hosea Matthews. They were both attempting to steal from each other, but quickly realized the mutual potential. This is where the gang was formed, which was later named as the infamous Van Der Lindes. It wasn't long after the gang was formed that they encountered Arthur Morgan and John Marston, both of which were teenagers at the time, making Dutch and Hosea like father figures. More members became rapidly joining the gang, which helped influence Dutch's charismatic persona, and Dutch was then seen as the leader. Throughout Red Dead Redemption 2, Dutch preaches ideals of freedom and loyalty. Dutch always believed in having faith. This is particularly seen around Chapter 5. Whilst at the beginning of Red Dead Redemption 2, the gang are struggling in Amberino. Dutch seems like a trustworthy and inclusive gang leader. He's keen in keeping people safe and even helps Sadie Adler get back on her feet after the murder of her husband. At this point, everyone has faith in Dutch. The gang makes their way to the Heartlands, and they seem to be able to recover at this point. Now, of course, not everything is easy going. The gang is constantly being chased down by the Pinkertons, and every time that they do seem to settle somewhere, they either start more conflict with a different group of people or the Pinkertons catch up to them. Most cases, it's both. This constantly leads to the gang having to be moved around, but through every single point of this, Dutch is always there, and even when there are moments when key characters start to question him, they still support him. He's still a strong leader with a vision which every gang member believes in. This is also the point in which cracks start to show. The dark side of Dutch is slowly revealed. His chaos and overall cruelty leads to gang members losing their trust. And after the events of Saint Denis, it just seemed to be like a catalyst of what was inevitably going to happen. There's actually a theory for an event that happened within Saint Denis where players actually believe that this is the cause to the problem. Dutch has always been an evil and cruel person beneath the surface, but after the mission Urban Pleasures, this is where Dutch gets Arthur and Lenny to help him rob a trolley station, except it turns out to be a setup from Angelo Bronte. Arthur, Lenny and Dutch try to escape via a trolley ride, but ultimately the trolley ends up crashing very badly. You can see in the short cinematics with Arthur and Lenny quickly getting up and behind cover, but Dutch taking a bit of time, even holding his head. It's from this point and after where Dutch no longer seems like himself, or at least the person that we met earlier on. He becomes slower within his decisions, he starts to question himself as well as others, and he becomes more cruel. There's always been that cruelty beneath the surface, but now he's not afraid to show it, and we get to see this when he feeds Angelo Bronte to a gator, and also when he kills the elderly woman within Guarma. And who knows what he would have done to Molly O'Shea, but Miss Grimshaw took action way before Dutch. This is by far one of the most popular theories out there, but it's not the only one. Another theory is that Dutch changed after the death of Hosea Matthews. As mentioned earlier in the video, Dutch and Hosea met at a young age, and the second that they met, they were forever partners. Throughout Hosea's last few years, everyone noticed that Hosea keeps Dutch grounded. It is a perfect partnership. Dutch is not against killing people, but Hosea doesn't like it. He likes the idea of the grift. To take money and steal from people without hurting anyone. And whenever there was a plan to do an activity, to steal from someone, to rob a bank, there was always that back and forth between Dutch and Hosea, so that they did have a plan that suited both of their needs. But after the death of Hosea, it gave Dutch a lot more power. But at the same time, he had to question himself because he's still dealing with the grief of losing his closest friend. He ended up taking it out on others because on the outside he looks like this strong gang leader, but on the inside he felt weak and alone after losing Hosea. Whatever theory you want to follow, maybe it's a mix of the both. It's at this point in which things did change. After the events of Red Dead Redemption 2, the gang completely fell apart, with everyone going in different directions. But for Dutch, this is where it links back to the beginning of this video. He always wanted a family, which replaced what he never had as a kid. And maybe it's that void that is now missing after the events of Red Dead Redemption 2, or maybe it was just power and control that he craved. He created a completely new gang in 1911, which was made up of young natives off the nearby reservations who detested the US government and the white man in general. This is when John Marston is tasked by Agent Edgar Ross to hunt down Van Der Linde after he did resurface. Even after such a long period of time since the Van Der Linde gang completely died off, and Dutch getting a chance to start completely fresh with new gang members and a new gang entirely, it didn't stop Dutch being cruel. He was ruthless in his approach to get back at John as well as get back at Edgar Ross, and didn't just take it out of them but also took it out on civilians. At the Blackwater Bank, Dutch took a woman hostage by the name of Muriel Scranton, and in his younger days he may have taken him hostage just for the money and a safe escape, but would let them go freely. But this time decided to use Muriel as a message and executed her right there and then right in front of John Marston whilst he's trying to track him down. It's not long after this where John, as well as with assistance from Edgar Ross and other authorities, they track the exact location of where Dutch and his gang are hiding out up in tall trees just outside Blackwater, and they take this opportunity to rush him. John and the lawmen chase Dutch on horseback. Eventually, Dutch is left alone at the edge of a cliff, and John is ready to fire his gun. But it's at this point in which Dutch says, "Our time has passed," and then proceeds to fall back off the cliff. And that was the end of Dutch Van Der Linde. With the events of Red Dead Redemption, Dutch seemed crazy. What actually led to this craziness, there's no exact point. It could just be not dealing with the death of his closest friend and partner in crime being Hosea Matthews. It could be that he suffered brain damage after that trolley crash from the mission of Urban Pleasures. Or maybe he was crazy all along. But one thing is for certain, he wanted a close family. The Van Der Linde gang gave him exactly that. And even if he was a bad person, being a father-like figure for both Arthur Morgan and John Marston is something that can't be overlooked. Even if it didn't end in a way that they both would have liked, Dutch and his gang went through many ups and downs. And even in Dutch's final speech, he still tries to warn John that he's in danger. He tells him that when I'm gone, they'll just find another monster. They have to, because they have to justify their wages. And of course, the final monster that they're looking for is John himself. And that leads to his very own brutal ending. But for Dutch, we will never know exactly what led to him being the way that he was in the end, especially with the odds were stacked against him and he still brought together so many people at the beginning, only for them all to either be killed off or to never want to be around Dutch again. This is the rise and fall of Dutch Van Der Linde.